I was 63 years old, standing in the middle of a Vancouver airport with $40 in my pocket, and I had no idea where my daughter had gone. That's how it started. Not with a fight, not with a dramatic scene, just a quiet disappearance. The kind that happens so smoothly you almost think you imagined it. We had been in Portugal for 2 weeks. My daughter's idea. She said I needed a proper vacation, that I'd been working too hard since my husband passed, that the sea air would do me good. I thought she was being thoughtful. I thought it was her way of reconnecting after years of small distances between us. I packed my good walking shoes and my light cardigan, and I told my neighbor Joanne to water my plants while I was gone. I should tell you something about me before I go any further. I'm not the kind of person who asks for help easily. I worked as a registered nurse for 31 years at Vancouver General. I raised my daughter mostly on my own after her father left when she was 9. I bought my house on Fraser Street with my own money, paid it down slowly, refinanced once when things were tight, and paid it off completely by the time I was 57. I'm not saying this to boast. I'm saying it because you need to understand what kind of woman I am, and what kind of woman my daughter knew she was dealing with when she did what she did. The trip itself was lovely. I won't pretend otherwise. Lisbon is a beautiful city. The tiles on the buildings, the hills, the way the light hits the water in the late afternoon. My daughter seemed happy. Her partner was with us. A quiet man, not unkind, but always slightly elsewhere, even when he was in the room. The 3 of us ate dinner together each night, walked during the day, and I started to feel, for the first time in a long while, that things might be okay, that maybe we had finally found our way back to each other. On the last morning, I woke up early. That's a habit I've never shaken from decades of morning shifts. I made myself a coffee with the little machine in the hotel room, packed my suitcase carefully, and set it by the door. My daughter had said she would knock at 8 to share a cab to the airport. I waited. 8 came and went. I knocked on her door. Nothing. I called her cell. It rang and rang. I told myself she'd probably just gone down to the lobby. I brought my suitcase down in the elevator, scanned the cafe, the entrance, the area near the front desk. The concierge told me in very polite, careful English that my daughter and her partner had checked out just after 6 in the morning. They had taken a taxi. He didn't know where. I stood there for a moment, my suitcase handle in my hand, a cup of coffee going cold on the counter behind me. I went back upstairs to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed. I opened my wallet. The debit card I'd been using during the trip was there. 40 Canadian dollars in cash, my passport, my health card. A small notebook I carry everywhere with important numbers written in it, which is an old habit from before smartphones and one I'm very glad I kept. I called my daughter again. Voicemail, I sent a text. No response. I called her partner's number, which I had written in my notebook from a Christmas 2 years ago when I needed to reach her in an emergency. He didn't pick up either. I sat there quietly for another minute. Then I took a breath and I started thinking. I had $40. I had my passport. I had a notebook full of phone numbers. My return flight was in 6 hours. My daughter had handled the booking. Everything had been done through her email, her account. I didn't have the booking reference. I didn't know which terminal. The hotel allowed me to use the lobby computer. I found the flight confirmation in an old forwarded email. Terminal 1, Air Canada, departing at 2:15 in the afternoon. I asked the concierge how much a taxi to the airport would cost. He said approximately €35. I had 40 Canadian dollars, which was roughly 27 euros. Not enough. A woman sitting nearby? She was maybe in her mid-50s, reading a book, wearing a yellow linen jacket, had been listening. Not intrusively, just the way you can't help listening when someone nearby is quietly having a hard time. She looked up and said, in a light Quebecois accent, that she was also going to the airport and would be happy to share a cab. She said it matter-of-factly, no fuss, just a practical offer from one woman to another. I said yes. I didn't leave a note. I didn't cry until we would well. She pretended not to notice. I'm grateful for that. At the airport, she helped me find the Air Canada desk. The agent there, a young Portuguese man with very precise English, confirmed my booking was still active. My daughter had not canceled my ticket. That was something. I boarded the plane. I found my seat. I did not eat the meal they brought around. I stared at the seat back in front of me for most of the 11 hours, and I thought about what it meant. That my daughter had left me in a foreign city with $40 and not called to check if I was still alive. When I landed in Vancouver and turned my phone off airplane mode, there were no messages from her. I took the Canada line home. I let myself in through my front door. The house was quiet and familiar and smelled like the particular combination of old wood and coffee and the candle I burn in the evenings that has always been, to me, the smell of safety. I changed my clothes. I made a cup of tea. I sat in my kitchen and I looked at the window above the sink and the maple tree in the backyard that my husband had planted when our daughter was born. And then I opened my laptop and I looked up my property information on the BC Assessment website. I don't know why I did it right then. Some instinct. Some low hum at the back of my mind that had been there since Lisbon and that I'd been ignoring because I didn't want it to be true. My house was not listed under my name. I sat very still. I read it again. I checked the address. I checked my name. I looked at the registered owner. It was a numbered company, one I didn't recognize. I put down my cup of tea and I went to find the folder where I keep my important documents. The deed, the mortgage discharge, the insurance papers. I'm organized that way. Always have been. 30 years of nursing teaches you that paperwork keeps people alive. The folder was there. The original deed was there. But there was also something else. A document I didn't recognize immediately. A transfer of title dated 4 months earlier. And at the bottom, in the signature line where it said, Registered Owner, there was my signature. Except I had not signed it. I sat with that for a very long time. Then I thought about 8 months ago, when my daughter had come over to help me update some paperwork for a home equity line of credit she said I should set up as a safety net. She had been very organized about it. She brought the forms. She explained them quickly while I made tea. She said it was straightforward and just administrative. I trusted her. She was my daughter. I signed where she pointed. I didn't read everything. I'm a nurse, not a lawyer. And she was my daughter. I called a lawyer the next morning, a real estate lawyer on Broadway whose name I'd heard from a colleague years ago, a woman named Helen who had helped another nurse on my old ward with a property dispute. I left a message. She called back within the hour. I told her what I'd found. She was quiet in the way lawyers get quiet when they're thinking quickly. She told me to bring everything, the original deed, the transfer document, any correspondence, anything my daughter had given me to sign. She said not to contact my daughter yet. I didn't. Over the next 2 weeks, Helen pieced it together. My daughter, using the power of attorney document I had signed 6 years earlier when I'd had a small health scare and thought it was sensible to have one in place, had transferred my home into a numbered company she had registered with her partner 2 years prior. She had done it in increments, carefully, in a way that was designed to look routine. She had also taken out a home equity line of credit against the property, drawing down $87,000 over 8 months. Helen told me this was elder financial abuse under British Columbia law. She told me I had a strong case. She told me the power of attorney had been misused and that the title transfer was likely voidable. I asked her what the process would involve. She explained. I listened carefully, the way I used to listen to doctors explaining a complicated case. Then I asked her one more thing. I asked her whether, if I proceeded, my daughter would face criminal charges. Helen said that was a possibility, yes. I went home and I sat with that for 3 days. I want to be honest with you about those 3 days, because I think people imagine that in situations like this, there's a clear path and you just walk it. There isn't. I sat in my kitchen and I thought about the 9-year-old girl who used to fall asleep on the couch while I studied for my nursing exams. I thought about the way she laughed at the same jokes her father used to laugh at, the same particular way, and how that used to break my heart a little every time. I thought about the Christmas she was 12, and we had no money, and she pretended not to mind. I also thought about a woman standing in a Lisbon hotel lobby with $40 in her wallet, not knowing if her flight had been canceled, not knowing if anyone in the world was going to call to ask if she was all right. No one did. In 2 weeks, my daughter did not call once. On the 4th day, I called Helen and told her to proceed. The legal process took 7 months. I won't detail all of it because it was exhausting in the way that slow institutional processes are exhausting. Forms, hearings, affidavits, waiting. But the outcome was this. The title transfer was voided. The home equity line of credit was frozen and then partially recovered through a civil judgment. My daughter and her partner did not face criminal charges in the end. A negotiated resolution that I agreed to for reasons that are mine alone, though Helen made clear I had grounds to push harder. What I got back was my house, and something I hadn't quite expected, a sense of my own steadiness. During those 7 months I kept living, I knew that sounds simple, but it wasn't always easy. I went to my walking group on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I had dinner with Joanne next door on Fridays. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center, something I'd thought about for years and never done. I was not good at it. I did it anyway. I'm not going to tell you I stopped loving my daughter. I don't think love works that way. Not the kind that's been in you for 35 years. But I stopped arranging my life around the hope that she would eventually see me clearly. About 8 months after the legal proceedings concluded, she called. It was a Sunday afternoon in October. The maple tree had gone full red. I was in the kitchen. I answered. I don't know why. Habit, maybe, or something more than that. Her voice was different. Quieter, less practiced. She said my name. Not Mom, just my name. And then she said she didn't know how to start. I told her she could take her time. We talked for about 40 minutes. I didn't shout. Neither did she. There were long silences. She didn't make excuses. Not really. She tried once or twice and then stopped herself. She said she had been telling herself a story about the house, about money, about what she was owed, and that she had stopped being able to see me as a person in the middle of that story. She said she knew that wasn't enough. She was right. It wasn't enough. I told her that. But I also told her this. I had survived Portugal with $40 and a stranger's kindness. I had survived 7 months of legal proceedings while going to watercolor class and eating Friday dinners and watching the tree in my backyard go red and gold and bare and then green again. I was not a woman who needed saving, and I was not a woman who could be erased. I had built this life and I still lived in it, and that was not going to change. She cried. I held the phone and listened to her cry. I didn't tell her everything would be fine. I don't know that it will be. We have a long road if we're going to have any road at all, and I hold no illusions about that. What I know is this: my name is on my deed. My house is mine. The maple tree my husband planted is going to go red again this autumn, and I'll be here to see it. That's what I wanted to tell you today. I kept thinking about that moment in the hotel lobby, my suitcase in one hand, a coffee going cold behind me, and the quiet understanding settling in that no one was coming. There's something clarifying about a moment like that. Not pleasant. I don't want to romanticize it, but clarifying, yes. Because when you're standing there with $40 and a notebook full of old phone numbers, you find out very quickly what you're actually made of. And I found out I was made of something steadier than I'd given myself credit for. What my daughter did was a choice, a series of choices actually, made over months, each one requiring her to look at me and decide I was less important than whatever she was reaching for. I've thought about how that happens to a person, how someone you raised, someone you sat with through fevers and failures and first heartbreaks, arrives at a place where they can leave their mother in a foreign city and not pick up the phone. I don't think it happens all at once. I think it happens slowly, in small justifications, in a story you tell yourself until the story feels like truth. But I also know this: the consequences of those choices were real and they were proportionate. She didn't lose everything. I made sure of that, in my own way, for my own reasons. But she lost the thing she was trying to take, and she lost a version of me that would have kept quiet about it. That's the part I want to sit with for a moment, because I think it matters. I could have been ashamed. A lot of women in my position would have been embarrassed to admit that their own child had done this, reluctant to call a lawyer, inclined to handle it privately and hope it went away. I understand that impulse. I felt it for about 48 hours, and then I decided that protecting my dignity was not more important than protecting what I'd spent 30 years building. That decision required me to be honest about what had happened, clear-eyed about what the document said, and willing to sit in a lawyer's office and say out loud, "My daughter stole from me." Saying it plainly, without softening it, was one of the harder things I've done, but it was also the thing that made everything after it possible. You can't solve a problem you're not willing to name. Helen told me once, near the end of the proceedings, that a lot of elder financial abuse cases never reach resolution because the person who was harmed can't bring themselves to follow through. I understood that completely. The love doesn't go away. It doesn't even really diminish, and that's the part no one warns you about. You can love someone and still hold them accountable. You can grieve what you lost and still fight for what's yours. Those things aren't opposites. I think about Joanne, who fed my plants and asked no questions and brought over soup twice during those 7 months without being asked. I think about the woman in the yellow jacket at the Lisbon hotel who shared a cab with a stranger and looked out the window so I could cry without being watched. Small dignities freely given. That's what integrity looks like from the outside. Not grand gestures, just choosing quietly and consistently to treat people as people. I rebuilt this year. Not dramatically, just steadily. Watercolor on Tuesday evenings. Walking in the mornings. Dinner with Joanne. The tree going red in the backyard. That's what I want to leave you with. Not a lesson exactly. I'm not sure I'm qualified to hand those out. Just this: the house is mine. My name is on the deed. And I'm still here, which is more than anyone who tried to erase me was counting on.